I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the new Volkswagen Passat Alltrack Premium. If you're a subscriber, you'll remember that a few weeks ago I brought along the new base Passat Alltrack, and that's a grade that Volkswagen have introduced in Australia to better take on the Subaru Outback. Now, I think that was a smart idea of Volkswagen, but in that review, I did say that because of the specification on that car, it still does make sense to spend up to the premium if you can spare the extra cash, because this is still the real deal. This is a full-fat Volkswagen Passat that's really nicely specified and makes you question whether or not you need something like an Audi, Mercedes, or BMW. Now, this particular car is very, very nicely specified. Aquamarine blue on top, that's a new color for the Passat, over Mistral grey inside, so a really nice contrasting colour set, quite unusual for a Volkswagen in Australia. But under the bonnet we still have the same 162 kilowatt turbo petrol and all-wheel drive configuration as the base model. So let's find out if this one is the true sweet spot. In contrast to the base model, which is fairly well equipped inside but kind of utilitarian in some ways, like its cloth seats, here the Passat Alltrack Premium shows us why this one is a really, really special car. The interior is basically luxury level in terms of the materials that have been used, and that's especially the case if you go for the Mistral grey. Now, black leather is standard, and of course that will be more practical, I'm not going to lie to you, but if you think you can live with this very light stone grey colour, it really gives the cabin of the Passat a lift. And the attention to detail is quite impressive because you get grey toppers here on the doors and on the dash. They don't just stick around with the same black plastics that you get on the regular version of the car. And I think that is really cool and a nice little bit of attention to detail, as I say. Now, the seats themselves in the Alltrack Premium are also upgraded. They're fully electric on both sides here in the front. Sage, both of them have heating and cooling. Very, very impressive, especially in a hot country like Australia. And they're also just genuinely soft Nappa leather, so you know it's a really high grade of upholstery. This is a comfortable car. It feels like the real deal. And we do get a new steering wheel, perforated here, paddle shifters, actual physical buttons rather than the touch pads that Volkswagen are moving to. Similarly, the old style Volkswagen gear shifter rather than the nub style thing that the brand is bringing in on cars like the Golf 8 and the new Skoda Octavia. I personally prefer this. Now, the dashboard in the Passat is relatively conservative, but we do get this really nice broad air vent design here, all squidgy plastics as well, aluminium, real aluminium accents on this car too. And then down here we have a 9.2 inch touchscreen with wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, navigation. It works well. Wireless CarPlay has been pretty reliable in my testing with this car. And then we've got a new climate control panel, which is touch-based, not as good as the old physical dials on the pre-facelift version of the car, but it still works well. And in terms of practicality, we've got big cup holders, adjustable armrest, storage there, USB-C power in this car, a tray ahead of the shifter, but no wireless charging, and we do get big door bins with flock lining, color-coded to the light grey interior. I should also mention there's been a change from DIN Audio to Harman Kardon for the premium sound in this car, and the stereo has improved over the pre-facelift version. Alright, let's take a look in the back seat. Back here, the Passat Alltrack shows us why the big station wagon continues to be a really good family car format if you don't need or if you don't want a third row in the back. The space on offer here is excellent, even for adults, so tall teenagers and the like will fit back here without any trouble. For myself at 6 foot, I've got more than enough headroom, despite the fact we've got a really big, really long panoramic sunroof in this car. You could get someone into the middle seat if you really had to, although it is still something of a perch. But we do have air vents back here, separate temperature zone, and then a little bit more USB charging, one more USB-C port and a 12-volt socket. Plus the doors are soft everywhere, really high quality. Even small things which are often missed, like the fact that the Volkswagen Group have various levels of door pulls. Now the Passat gets squidgy door pulls, but something like a Golf or a Tiguan, they're rock hard. Just a tiny thing, but over years of opening and closing the doors, you're going to notice. We've also got built-in sun blinds here to keep the sun off the face of little ones. We've got more soft materials on the top of the door, the Harman Kardon speakers, and a flip-down armrest here with 2.5 cup holders. so that you can have a drink while sitting back here, and you're also very well supported by the angle of the seat base. So all in all, it's a good, roomy, big family car. Only 2 rows, that will be an impediment for some, but if you can get away with it, it's very nice. Around here at the back of the refreshed Passat Alltrack, you can see the new style Volkswagen badge, centered lettering for the Passat name, new 4Motion badge, and just the generally quite crisp design of the Passat wagon. Hasn't changed that much over the pre-facelift. But one thing they have done is they've actually given it a bit more ground clearance, so it looks a bit less like a regular wagon, a tiny bit more pumped up. Personally, I think it suits. You also get proximity entry to all 4 doors and the boot, no matter which grade you go for. Very handy feature for if you've got your hands full of kids or shopping or whatever. And it opens up to reveal a 650 litre boot, which is generously sized. Tall, we've got a retractable cargo blind here. We've got pulls to remotely release the back seats and drop them completely flat. We've got netting, and we also have a spare wheel beneath the boot floor, which is handy to have. And then we've got controls to close the boot, so we can just walk away, but of course we're going to drive it just after we chat about the running costs of this car. Just before we drive, let's talk about the running costs for the Passat Alltrack, which have actually changed quite a lot on account of the fact this car has switched from diesel to petrol power. That means fuel consumption has increased markedly over the pre-facelift version. Around town, you'll be able to get about 10 litres per 100 Ks out of this car. On the highway, you'll get 6.5 to 7 without too much trouble. So not terrible, but certainly not as frugal as the old 140 TDI engine. Then there's servicing, which occurs every 15,000 kilometres or 12 months, whichever comes first. Now, servicing is actually fairly costly for Volkswagens in Australia, and if you pay every time you rock up for a service, you'll be spending about $3,500 over 5 years to service this car. Now, you can get yourself a discount if you buy a 5-year care plan up front, which costs about $2,500 for this car. So that's quite a decent saving if you want to do that at the time you buy the Passat. And in terms of warranty, it's 5 years with unlimited kilometres. So what's the Alltrack Premium like when you get it out onto the road? Well, it's quite interesting to jump into the Premium so soon after I reviewed the standard Passat Alltrack 162 TSI, because the cars are quite similar mechanically, and yet they present differently, as we've already kind of gone through looking at the car in a static fashion. But they actually drive quite differently as well when it comes to ride and handling. And that's interesting because the only mechanical change is that the wheel size steps up to 19-inch on the Alltrack Premium compared to 18-inch wheels on the standard car. Now, the 18s do have a cushier tyre. They've got a taller sidewall. Here on the Premium, the 19-inch wheels are a classic, low-profile tyre. Now, that, I guess, sort of clashes with the stated image of the Passat Alltrack in that it's meant to be a kind of lifted gravel roady sort of version of the Passat wagon, and that's all still possible even if you do have a 19-inch wheel and a slightly low profile tyre, which is a Pirelli Cinturato P7 on this particular car. But obviously with the Premium, the aesthetic of the vehicle outside is stepped up, and so the wheel size gets bigger to look good, and that has its own impacts, and we'll get to the ride and handling in just a second. But first of all, let's remind ourselves of what you get under the bonnet, because if you're an existing Passat Alltrack driver, then this will actually look quite unfamiliar in that we've gone from diesel power to petrol for 2021, and the Passat Alltrack has always had a diesel engine here in Australia. So it now has a 162 kilowatt, 350 newton meter, 2 litre turbo petrol. So it's more powerful than the old diesel, which had 140 kilowatts last time the Alltrack was available, which was 2018 in Australia officially. But we have slightly less torque. 350 newton meters is a little down on the diesel's 400 newton meters, but still, this engine is really tractable, torquey, down low, and the character doesn't end up being all that different to a small turbo diesel like you got in the previous version of this car. There's still heaps of go low down, it's just that it has a more flexible top end, and it's considerably more refined because it's a petrol engine. However, it also is much thirstier in the real world than the diesel was. With the diesel, you could easily, get close to 6 litres per 100 Ks if you tried. Here in the petrol around town, you'll get sort of 10-ish worse if you're exploiting the Golf GTI-ness of this engine, because of course it is the same engine used in the Golf GTI, Golf R, but with 162 kilowatts. Then on the highway, 7.5 litres per 100 Ks is possible. But it's not a super frugal engine, I guess, is the point. My personal opinion is that on balance, it's a nice change. This car is comfortable, luxurious, plush, and pretty refined in a general sense. And the fact that the engine now isn't chugging away all the time and instead actually just is more or less silent unless you're completely revving it out is welcome. But people that preferred a diesel Passat wagon will feel let down because there is no such thing in Australia anymore. The entire range is now petrol powered. And it's probably a good time to also mention the fact that you can get a base Passat petrol with 140 kilowatts. You can get the same 162 kilowatt tune in a standard Passat sedan and Passat wagon. And then you can also buy a flagship Passat wagon with 206 kilowatts of power, also with all-wheel drive, but the Alltrack only comes with 162 kilowatts. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. It's entirely personal preference whether you like this engine or not, but I do. It also matches really well to the crisp 7-speed wet clutch DSG auto in this car. I think people that are still complaining that DSGs are jerky or unpredictable are actually being a little bit lazy. The technology is sort of 15-20 years old now. The gearboxes have gone through so many generations and iterations. This one is really good. The wet clutch ones especially are really durable. And look, I think it's a good gearbox. It suits the car. Got paddle shifters as well, but the logic in the box is really intelligent. I haven't felt the need to use the paddles. And in terms of ride and handling, we've got adaptive dampers. We've got 19-inch wheels, as I mentioned, relatively low-profile tyres. And the ride is probably what you would expect, which is a little more firm than soft. Perhaps slightly more sporty, slightly more focused than you might expect if you currently drive something like a Subaru Outback. It's a European ride, to quote a phrase that our American friends occasionally use in reviews of cars like this. You can feel the road surface, definitely. On really broken up Australian roads, you would almost call the ride terse at times. But if you find a middling or smooth bit of tarmac, it's just gorgeous. It's controlled. Of course, you can vary the dampers, but putting them towards comfort, it just actually increases the vertical motion of the suspension and makes it feel a bit boaty. It doesn't actually do a better job of soaking up bumps. However, if you put it all the way to sport and it totally limits the body motion, then you definitely do notice more lumps and bumps and crashes. My preferred setting was if the adaptive dampers are in the middle, just slightly to the comfort side of the middle, because there's about, 10 or 15 different settings. It's not just 2 settings. So slightly to the comfort side of normal, I found was a really good mix between a nice level ride, just a little bit of plushness, soaking up undulations really well, but you still feel what's going on the road underfoot. Now, interestingly, the ride is no worse than on the 18s. In fact, it's slightly better. My theory is that the tuning for the suspension on the Alltrack, the 2021 version, was done with 19-inch wheels. The 18s actually lump and thump around much more than I expected they would. The 19s, bizarrely, the wheel control actually feels slightly superior, despite the fact the wheels themselves would be heavier. So it's an unusual situation, but the ride is definitely not worse on 19s, and in fact it might actually be slightly better, unusually. But anyway, it's a comfortable car to drive. It's, edges towards sportiness. You really can toss it around. In fact, the Passat Alltrack starts to feel better and better the harder you push it in some ways, but it's classic Volkswagen MQB platform in that sense. Visibility out's really good. You see these nice anodized silver mirrors. The white interior or the grey interior just looks really nice in your peripheral vision. Nice new steering wheel, perforated leather, cracking stereo. In the Premium, the Harman Kardon's really good, and the safety stuff is actually really well tuned. It's standard across both variants, but you get adaptive cruise, you get forwards and reversing AEB, you get blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, lane keep assist that actually works well, but you can turn it off with 2 taps. Yeah, it's a really nicely sorted car, and especially if you're looking for, a pleasantly luxurious family wagon, but you kind of don't want to be spending like 70, 80, 90 grand. For about 63, 64 drive away, this is tidy. Particularly because the Outback just doesn't have anything in the way of an engaging engine. This is a nice antidote. So those are my opinions of the Volkswagen Passat Alltrack Premium. Personally, I think this is the Alltrack to go for. It's a good idea to bring in a base model to better compete with the Outback, but given the stack of kit that you get on the Premium, this feels like an entry-level luxury car, bona fide. All-wheel drive, the Golf GTI's motor, they make for a really good combination for this car, which is pleasant to drive, comfortable to ride in, and very elegant to look at. Well, those are my thoughts. You can let me know what you think down below. Is this a car that you're considering in alternative to the Outback? While you're down there, make sure to hit subscribe if you haven't already done so. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.